Chapter 16. In the morning it was raining. A fog had come over the mountains from the sea. You could not see the tops of the mountains. The plateau was dull and gloomy, and the shapes of the trees and the houses were changed. I walked out beyond the town to look at the weather. The bad weather was coming over the mountains from the sea. The flags in the square hung wet from the white poles, and the banners were wet and hung damp against the front of the houses, and in between the steady drizzle the rain came down and drove everyone under the arcades and made pools of water in the square, and the streets wet and dark and deserted. Yet the fiesta kept up without any pause. It was only driven under cover. The covered seats of the bull ring had been crowded with people sitting out of the rain watching the concourse of Basque and Navarrese dancers and singers, and afterward the Val Carlos dancers in their costumes danced down the street in the rain, the drums sounding hollow and damp, and the chiefs of the bands riding ahead on their big, heavy-footed horses, their costumes wet, the horses' coats wet in the rain. The crowd was in the cafes, and the dancers came in, too, and sat, their tight-wound white legs under the tables, shaking the water from their belled caps, and spreading their red and purple jackets over the chairs to dry. It was raining hard outside. I left the crowd in the cafe and went over to the hotel to get shaved for dinner. I was shaving in my room when there was a knock on the door. "Come in," I called. Montoya walked in. "How are you?" he said. "Fine," I said. "No bulls today?" "No," I said. "Nothing but rain." "Where are your friends?" "Or at the Aruna." Montoya smiled his embarrassed smile. "Look," he said. "Do you know the American ambassador?" "Yes," I said. "Everybody knows the American ambassador." "He's here in town now." "Yes," I said. "Everybody's seen them." "I've seen them, too," Montoya said. He didn't say anything. I went on shaving. "Sit down," I said. "Let me send for a drink." "No, I have to go." I finished shaving and put my face down into the bowl and washed it with cold water. Montoya was standing there looking more embarrassed. "Look," he said. "I've just had a message from them at the Grand Hotel that they want Pedro Romero and Marshal Lalanda to come over for coffee tonight after dinner." "Well," I said, "it can't hurt Marshal any. Marshal has been in San Sebastian all day. He drove over in a car this morning with Marquez. I don't think they'll be back tonight." Montoya stood embarrassed. He wanted me to say something. "Don't give Romero the message," I said. "You think so?" "Absolutely." Montoya was very pleased. "I wanted to ask you because you were an American," he said. "That's what I'd do." "Look," said Montoya, "people take a boy like that. They don't know what he's worth. They don't know what he means. Any foreigner can flatter him. They start this Grand Hotel business, and in 1 year they're through." "Like Al Gabeno," I said. "Yes, like Al Gabeno." "They're a fine lot," I said. "There's one American woman down here now that collects bullfighters." "I know. They only want the young ones." "Yes," I said. "The old ones get fat. Or crazy like Gallo." "Well," I said, "it's easy. All you have to do is not give him the message." "He's such a fine boy," said Montoya. "He ought to stay with his own people. He shouldn't mix in that stuff." "Won't you have a drink?" I asked. "No," said Montoya. "I have to go." He went out. I went downstairs and out the door and took a walk around through the arcades around the square. It was still raining. I looked in at the Aruna for the gang and they were not there, so I walked on around the square and back to the hotel. They were eating dinner in the downstairs dining room. They were well ahead of me, and it was no use trying to catch them. Bill was buying shoe shines for Mike. Bootblacks opened the street door and each one Bill called over and started to work on Mike. "This is the 11th time my boots have been polished," Mike said. "I say, Bill is an ass." The bootblacks had evidently spread the report. Another came in. "Limpia botas," he said to Bill. "No," said Bill. "For this sinner." The bootblack knelt down beside the one at work and started on Mike's free shoe that shone already in the electric light. Bill's a yell of laughter, Mike said. I was drinking red wine, and so far behind them that I felt a little uncomfortable about all this shoe shining. I looked around the room. At the next table was Pedro Romero. He stood up when I nodded and asked me to come over and meet a friend. His table was beside ours, almost touching. I met the friend, a Madrid bullfight critic, a little man with a drawn face. I told Romero how much I liked his work, and he was very pleased. We talked Spanish and the critic knew a little French. I reached to our table for my wine bottle, but the critic took my arm. Romero laughed. "Drink here," he said in English. He was very bashful about his English, but he was really very pleased with it, and as we went on talking, he brought out words he was not sure of, and asked me about them. He was anxious to know the English for Corda de Toros, the exact translation. Bullfight he was suspicious of. I explained that bullfight in Spanish was the lidia of a toro. The Spanish word corda means in English the running of bulls. The French translation is course de toro. The critic put that in. There is no Spanish word for bullfight. Pedro Romero said he had learned a little English in Gibraltar. He was born in Ronda. That is not far above Gibraltar. He started bullfighting in Malaga in the bullfighting school there. He had only been at it 3 years. The bullfight critic joked him about the number of Malagueño expressions he used. He was 19 years old, he said. His older brother was with him as a banderillero, but he did not live in this hotel. He lived in a smaller hotel with the other people who worked for Romero. He asked me how many times I had seen him in the ring. I told him only 3. It was really only 2, but I did not want to explain after I had made the mistake. "Where did you see me the other time?" "In Madrid." Yes, I lied. I had read the accounts of his 2 appearances in Madrid in the bullfight papers, so I was all right. "The first or the second time?" "The first." "I was very bad," he said. "The second time I was better." You remember he turned to the critic. He was not at all embarrassed. He talked of his work as something altogether apart from himself. There was nothing conceited or braggartly about him. "I like it very much that you like my work," he said. "But you haven't seen it yet. Tomorrow, if I get a good bull, I will try and show it to you." When he said this, he smiled, anxious that neither the bullfight critic nor I would think he was boasting. "I am anxious to see it," the critic said. "I would like to be convinced." "He doesn't like my work much." Romero turned to me. He was serious. The critic explained that he liked it very much, but that so far it had been incomplete. "Wait till tomorrow, if a good one comes out." "Have you seen the bulls for tomorrow?" the critic asked me. "Yes, I saw them unloaded." Pedro Romero leaned forward. "What did you think of them?" "Very nice," I said. "About 26 arrobas. Very short horns. Haven't you seen them?" "Oh yes," said Romero. "They won't weigh 26 arrobas," said the critic. "No," said Romero. "They've got bananas for horns," the critic said. "You call them bananas?" asked Romero. He turned to me and smiled. "You wouldn't call them bananas?" "No," I said. "They're horns, all right." "They're very short," said Pedro Romero. "Very, very short. Still, they aren't bananas." "I say," Jake Brett called from the next table. "You have deserted us." "Just temporarily," I said. "We're talking bulls." "You are superior." "Tell him that bulls have no balls," Mike shouted. He was drunk. Romero looked at me inquiringly. "Drunk," I said. "Borracho. Muy borracho." "You might introduce your friends," Brett said. She had not stopped looking at Pedro Romero. I asked them if they would like to have coffee with us. They both stood up. Romero's face was very brown. He had very nice manners. I introduced them all around and they started to sit down, but there was not enough room, so we all moved over to the big table by the wall to have coffee. Mike ordered a bottle of Fundador and glasses for everybody. There was a lot of drunken talking. "Tell him I think writing is lousy," Bill said. "Go on, tell him. Tell him I'm ashamed of being a writer." Pedro Romero was sitting beside Brett and listening to her. "Go on, tell him," Bill said. Romero looked up smiling. "This gentleman," I said, "is a writer." Romero was impressed. "This other one, too," I said, pointing at Cohn. "He looks like Villalta," Romero said, looking at Bill. "Raphael, doesn't he look like Villalta?" "I can't see it," the critic said. "Really," Romero said in Spanish. "He looks a lot like Villalta. What does the drunken one do?" "Nothing." "Is that why he drinks?" "No, he's waiting to marry this lady." "Tell him bulls have no balls," Mike shouted, very drunk, from the other end of the table. "What does he say?" "He's drunk." "Jake," Mike called. "Tell him bulls have no balls." "You understand," I said. "Yes." I was sure he didn't, so it was all right. "Tell him Brett wants to see him put on those green pants." "Pipe down, Mike." "Tell him Brett is dying to know how he can get into those pants." "Pipe down." During this, Romero was fingering his glass and talking with Brett. Brett was talking French and he was talking Spanish and a little English, and laughing. Bill was filling the glasses. "Tell him Brett wants to come in too." "Oh, pipe down, Mike, for Christ's sake." Romero looked up smiling. "Pipe down." "I know that," he said. Just then Montoya came into the room. He started to smile at me. Then he saw Pedro Romero with a big glass of cognac in his hand, sitting laughing between me and a woman with bare shoulders, at a table full of drunks. He did not even nod. Montoya went out of the room. Mike was on his feet proposing a toast. "Let's all drink to," he began. "Pedro Romero," I said. Everybody stood up. Romero took it very seriously, and we touched glasses and drank it down, I rushing it a little, because Mike was trying to make it clear that that was not at all what he was going to drink to. But it went off all right, and Pedro Romero shook hands with everyone, and he and the critic went out together. "My God. He's a lovely boy," Brett said. "And how I would love to see him get into those clothes. He must use a shoehorn." I started to tell him. Mike began, and Jake kept interrupting me. "Why do you interrupt me? Do you think you talk Spanish better than I do?" "Oh, shut up, Mike. Nobody interrupted you." "No, I'd like to get this settled." He turned away from me. "Do you think you amount to something, Cohn? Do you think you belong here among us, people who are out to have a good time? For God's sake, don't be so noisy, Cohn." "Oh, cut it out," Mike Cohn said. "Do you think Brett wants you here? Do you think you add to the party? Why don't you say something?" "I said all I had to say the other night, Mike." "I'm not one of you literary chaps." Mike stood shakily and leaned against the table. "I'm not clever, but I do know when I'm not wanted. Why don't you see when you're not wanted, Cohn? Go away, for God's sake. Take that sad Jewish face away. Don't you think I'm right?" He looked at us. "Sure," I said. "Let's all go over to the arena." "No. Don't you think I'm right? I love that woman." "Oh, don't start that again." "Do shove it along," Michael Brett said. "Don't you think I'm right, Jake?" Cohn still sat at the table. His face had the sallow, yellow look it got when he was insulted, but somehow he seemed to be enjoying it, the childish, drunken heroics of it. It was his affair with the lady of title. "Jake," Mike said. He was almost crying. "You know I'm right." "Listen, you," he turned to Cohn, "go away. Go away now." "But I won't go," Mike said. "Cohn." "Then I'll make you." Mike started toward him around the table. Cohn stood up and took off his glasses. He stood waiting, his face sallow, his hands fairly low, proudly and firmly waiting for the assault, ready to do battle for his lady love. I grabbed Mike. "Come on to the cafe," I said. "You can't hit him here in the hotel." "Good," said Mike. "Good idea." We started off. I looked back as Mike stumbled up the stairs and saw Cohn putting his glasses on again. Bill was sitting at the table pouring another glass of Fundador. Brett was sitting looking straight ahead at nothing. Outside on the square it had stopped raining and the moon was trying to get through the clouds. There was a wind blowing. The military band was playing and the crowd was massed on the far side of the square where the fireworks specialist and his son were trying to send up fire balloons. A balloon would start up jerkily, on a great bias, and be torn by the wind or blown against the houses of the square. Some fell into the crowd. The magnesium flared and the fireworks exploded and chased about in the crowd. There was no one dancing in the square. The gravel was too wet. Brett came out with Bill and joined us. We stood in the crowd and watched Don Manuel Urquido, the fireworks king, standing on a little platform, carefully starting the balloons with sticks, standing above the heads of the crowd to launch the balloons off into the wind. The wind brought them all down, and Don Manuel Urquido's face was sweaty in the light of his complicated fireworks that fell into the crowd and charged and chased, sputtering and cracking, between the legs of the people. The people shouted as each new luminous paper bubble careened, caught fire and fell. "They're razzing Don Manuel," Bill said. "How do you know he's Don Manuel?" Brett said. "His name's on the program. Don Manuel Urquido, the Pirotecnico of esta ciudad." "Globos Illuminados," Mike said. "A collection of globos illuminados. That's what the paper said." The wind blew the band music away. "I say, I wish one would go up," Brett said. "That Don Manuel chap is furious. He's probably worked for weeks fixing them to go off, spelling out hail to San Fermin," Bill said. "Globos illuminados," Mike said. "A bunch of bloody globos illuminados." "Oh, come on," said Brett. "We can't stand here." "Her ladyship wants a drink," Mike said. "How you know things," Brett said. Inside, the cafe was crowded and very noisy. No one noticed us come in. We could not find a table. There was a great noise going on. "Come on, let's get out of here," Bill said. Outside, the patio was going in under the arcade. There were some English and Americans from Biarritz in sport clothes scattered at the tables. Some of the women stared at the people going by with laudanums. We had acquired, at some time, a friend of Bill's from Biarritz. She was staying with another girl at the Grand Hotel. The other girl had a headache and had gone to bed. "Here's the pub," Mike said. It was the Bar Milano, a small, tough bar where you could get food and where they danced in the back room. We all sat down at a table and ordered a bottle of Fundador. The bar was not full. There was nothing going on. "This is a hell of a place," Bill said. "It's too early." "Let's take the bottle and come back later," Bill said. "I don't want to sit here on a night like this." "Let's go and look at the English," Mike said. "I love to look at the English." "They're awful," Bill said. "Where did they all come from?" "They come from Biarritz," Mike said. "They come to see the last day of the quaint little Spanish fiesta." "I'll festa them," Bill said. "You're an extraordinarily beautiful girl," Mike turned to Bill's friend. "When did you come here?" "Come off it, Michael. I say, she is a lovely girl. Where have I been? Where have I been looking all this while? You're a lovely thing. Have we met? Come along with me and Bill. We're going to festa the English." "I'll festa them," Bill said. "What the hell are they doing at this fiesta?" "Come on," Mike said. "Just us three. We're going to festa the bloody English. I hope you're not English. I'm Scotch. I hate the English. I'm going to festa them. Come on, Bill." Through the window we saw them, all three arm in arm, going toward the cafe. Rockets were going up in the square. "I'm going to sit here," Brett said. "I'll stay with you," Cohen said. "Oh, don't," Brett said. "For God's sake, go off somewhere. Can't you see Jake and I want to talk?" "I didn't," Cohen said. "I thought I'd sit here because I felt a little tight." "What a hell of a reason for sitting with anyone. If you're tight, go to bed. Go on to bed." "Was I rude enough to him?" Brett asked. Cohen was gone. My God, I'm so sick of him. He doesn't add much to the gaiety. He depresses me so. He's behaved very badly. Damned badly. He had a chance to behave so well. He's probably waiting just outside the door now. Yes, he would. You know, I do know how he feels. He can't believe it didn't mean anything. I know. Nobody else would behave as badly. Oh, I'm so sick of the whole thing. And Michael. Michael's been lovely too. It's been damned hard on Mike. Yes, but he didn't need to be a swine. Everybody behaves badly, I said. Give them the proper chance. You wouldn't behave badly, Brett looked at me. I'd be as big an ass as Cone, I said. Darling, let's talk a lot of rot. All right, talk about anything you like. Don't be difficult. You're the only person I've got, and I feel rather awful tonight. You've got Mike. Yes, Mike. Hasn't he been pretty? Well, I said, it's been damned hard on Mike, having Cone around and seeing him with you. Don't I know it, darling? Please don't make me feel any worse than I do. Brett was nervous as I had never seen her before. She kept looking away from me and looking ahead at the wall. Want to go for a walk? Yes, come on. I corked up the Fundador bottle and gave it to the bartender. Let's have one more drink of that, Brett said. My nerves are rotten. We each drank a glass of the smooth Amontillado brandy. Come on, said Brett. As we came out the door, I saw Cone walk out from under the arcade. He was there, Brett said. He can't be away from you. Poor devil. I'm not sorry for him. I hate him myself. I hate him, too, she shivered. I hate his damned suffering. We walked arm in arm down the side street away from the crowd and the lights of the square. The street was dark and wet, and we walked along it to the fortifications at the edge of town. We passed wine shops with light coming out from their doors onto the black, wet street and sudden bursts of music. Want to go in? No. We walked out across the wet grass and onto the stone wall of the fortifications. I spread a newspaper on the stone and Brett sat down. Across the plain it was dark and we could see the mountains. The wind was high up and took the clouds across the moon. Below us were the dark pits of the fortifications. Behind were the trees and the shadow of the cathedral and the town silhouetted against the moon. Don't feel bad, I said. I feel like hell, Brett said. Let's talk. We looked out at the plain. The long lines of trees were dark in the moonlight. There were the lights of a car on the road climbing the mountain. Up on the top of the mountain we saw the lights of the fort. Below to the left was the river. It was high from the rain and black and smooth. Trees were dark along the banks. We sat and looked out. Brett stared straight ahead. Suddenly she shivered. It's cold. Want to walk back. Through the park. We climbed down. It was clouding over again. In the park it was dark under the trees. Do you still love me, Jake? Yes, I said. Because I'm a goner, Brett said. How? I'm a goner. I'm mad about the Romero boy. I'm in love with him, I think. I wouldn't be if I were you. I can't help it. I'm a goner. It's tearing me all up inside. Don't do it. I can't help it. I've never been able to help anything. You ought to stop it. How can I stop it? I can't stop things. Feel that. Her hand was trembling. I'm like that all through. You oughtn't to do it. I can't help it. I'm a goner now. Anyway, don't you see the difference? No. I've got to do something. I've got to do something I really want to do. I've lost my self-respect. You don't have to do that. Oh, darling, don't be difficult. What do you think it's meant to have that damn Jew about, and Mike the way he's acted? Sure. I can't just stay tight all the time. No. Oh, darling, please stay by me. Please stay by me and see me through this. Sure. I don't say it's right. It is right, though, for me. God knows I've never felt such a bitch. What do you want me to do? Come on, Brett said. Let's go and find him. Together we walked down the gravel path in the park in the dark, under the trees, and then out from under the trees and past the gate into the street that led into town. Pedro Romero was in the cafe. He was at a table with other bullfighters and bullfight critics. They were smoking cigars. When we came in, they looked up. Romero smiled and bowed. We sat down at a table halfway down the room. I asked him to come over and have a drink. Not yet. He'll come over. I can't look at him. He's nice to look at, I said. I've always done just what I wanted. I know. I do feel such a bitch. Well, I said. My God, said Brett, the things a woman goes through. Yes. Oh, I do feel such a bitch. I looked across at the table. Pedro Romero smiled. He said something to the other people at his table and stood up. He came over to our table. I stood up and we shook hands. Won't you have a drink? You must have a drink with me, he said. He seated himself, asking Brett's permission without saying anything. He had very nice manners, but he kept on smoking his cigar. It went well with his face. You like cigars? I asked. Oh yes, I always smoke cigars. It was part of his system of authority. It made him seem older. I noticed his skin. It was clear and smooth and very brown. There was a triangular scar on his cheekbone. I saw he was watching Brett. He felt there was something between them. He must have felt it when Brett gave him her hand. He was being very careful. I think he was sure, but he did not want to make any mistake. You fight tomorrow, I said. Yes, he said. Algabeno was hurt today in Madrid. Did you hear? No, I said. Badly. He shook his head. Nothing. Here he showed his hand. Brett reached out and spread the fingers apart. Oh, he said in English, you tell fortunes. Sometimes. Do you mind? No, I like it. He spread his hand flat on the table. Tell me I live for always and be a millionaire. He was still very polite, but he was surer of himself. Look, he said, do you see any bulls in my hand? He laughed. His hand was very fine and the wrist was small. There are thousands of bulls, Brett said. She was not at all nervous now. She looked lovely. Good, Romero laughed. At 1,000 duros apiece, he said to me in Spanish. Tell me some more. It's a good hand, Brett said. I think he'll live a long time. Say it to me, not to your friend. I said you'd live a long time. I know it, Romero said. I'm never going to die. I tapped with my fingertips on the table. Romero saw it. He shook his head. No, don't do that. The bulls are my best friends. I translated to Brett. You kill your friends, she asked. Always, he said in English, and laughed. So they don't kill me, he looked at her across the table. You know English well. Yes, he said. Pretty well, sometimes. But I must not let anybody know. It would be very bad, a torero who speaks English. Why, asked Brett. It would be bad. The people would not like it. Not yet. Why not? Why not? They would not like it. Bullfighters are not like that. What are bullfighters like? He laughed and tipped his hat down over his eyes and changed the angle of his cigar and the expression of his face. Like at the table, he said. I glanced over. He had mimicked exactly the expression of National. He smiled, his face natural again. No, I must forget English. Don't forget it, yet Brett said. No. No. All right. He laughed again. I would like a hat like that, Brett said. Good. I'll get you one. Right. See that you do. I will. I'll get you one tonight. I stood up. Romero rose too. Sit down, I said. I must go and find our friends and bring them here. He looked at me. It was a final look to ask if it were understood. It was understood all right. Sit down, Brett said to him. You must teach me Spanish. He sat down and looked at her across the table. I went out. The hard-eyed people at the bullfighter table watched me go. It was not pleasant. When I came back and looked in the cafe, 20 minutes later, Brett and Pedro Romero were gone. The coffee glasses and our 3 empty cognac glasses were on the table. A waiter came with a cloth and picked up the glasses and mopped off the table. Chapter 17. Outside the bar Milano, I found Bill and Mike and Edna. Edna was the girl's name. We've been thrown out, Edna said. By the police, said Mike. There's some people in there that don't like me. I've kept them out of 4 fights, Edna said. You've got to help me. Bill's face was red. Come back in, Edna, he said. Go on in there and dance with Mike. It's silly, Edna said. There'll just be another row. Damned Biarritz swine, Bill said. Come on, Mike said. After all, it's a pub. They can't occupy a whole pub. Good old Mike, Bill said. Damned English swine come here and insult Mike and try and spoil the fiesta. They're so bloody, Mike said. I hate the English. They can't insult Mike, Bill said. Mike is a swell fellow. They can't insult Mike. I won't stand it. Who cares if he is a damn bankrupt? His voice broke. Who cares, Mike said. I don't care. Jake doesn't care. Do you care? No, Edna said. Are you a bankrupt? Of course I am. You don't care, do you, Bill? Bill put his arm around Mike's shoulder. I wish to hell I was a bankrupt. I'd show those bastards. They're just English, Mike said. It never makes any difference what the English say. The dirty swine, Bill said. I'm going to clean them out. Bill, Edna looked at me. Please don't go in again, Bill. They're so stupid. That's it, said Mike. They're stupid. I knew that was what it was. They can't say things like that about Mike, Bill said. Do you know them? I asked Mike. No, I never saw them. They say they know me. I won't stand it, Bill said. Come on. Let's go over to the Suizo, I said. They're a bunch of Edna's friends from Biarritz, Bill said. They're simply stupid, Edna said. One of them's Charlie Blackman, from Chicago, Bill said. I was never in Chicago, Mike said. Edna started to laugh and could not stop. Take me away from here, she said, you bankrupts. What kind of a row was it? I asked Edna. We were walking across the square to the Suizo. Bill was gone. I don't know what happened, but someone had the police called to keep Mike out of the back room. There were some people that had known Mike at Cannes. What's the matter with Mike? Probably he owes them money, I said. That's what people usually get bitter about. In front of the ticket booths out in the square, there were 2 lines of people waiting. They were sitting on chairs or crouched on the ground with blankets and newspapers around them. They were waiting for the wickets to open in the morning to buy tickets for the bullfight. The night was clearing and the moon was out. Some of the people in the line were sleeping. At the Café Suizo, we had just sat down and ordered Fundador when Robert Cohen came up. Where's Brett? He asked. I don't know. She was with you. She must have gone to bed. She's not. I don't know where she is. His face was sallow under the light. He was standing up. Tell me where she is. Sit down, I said. I don't know where she is. The hell you don't. You can shut your face. Tell me where Brett is. I'll not tell you a damn thing. You know where she is. If I did, I wouldn't tell you. Oh, go to hell, Cohen, Mike called from the table. Brett's gone off with the bullfighter chap. They're on their honeymoon. You shut up. Oh, go to hell, Mike said languidly. Is that where she is? Cohen turned to me. Go to hell. She was with you. Is that where she is? Go to hell. I'll make you tell me. He stepped forward, you damned pimp. I swung at him and he ducked. I saw his face duck sideways in the light. He hit me and I sat down on the pavement. As I started to get on my feet, he hit me twice. I went down backward under a table. I tried to get up and felt I did not have any legs. I felt I must get on my feet and try and hit him. Mike helped me up. Someone poured a carafe of water on my head. Mike had an arm around me and I found I was sitting on a chair. Mike was pulling at my ears. "I say, you were cold," Mike said. "Where the hell were you?" "Oh, I was around." "You didn't want to mix in it." "He knocked Mike down, too," Edna said. "He didn't knock me out," Mike said. "I just lay there." "Does this happen every night at your fiestas?" Edna asked. "Wasn't that Mr. Cohn?" "I'm all right," I said. My head's a little wobbly. There were several waiters and a crowd of people standing around. "Vaya," said Mike. "Get away. Go on." The waiters moved the people away. "It was quite a thing to watch," Edna said. "He must be a boxer." "He is." "I wish Bill had been here," Edna said. "I'd like to have seen Bill knocked down, too. I've always wanted to see Bill knocked down. He's so big." "I was hoping he would knock down a waiter," Mike said, "and get arrested. I'd like to see Mr. Robert Cohen in jail." "No," I said. "Met." "Oh, no," said Edna. "You don't mean that." "I do, though," Mike said. "I'm not one of these chaps likes being knocked about. I never play games, even." Mike took a drink. "I never liked to hunt, you know. There was always the danger of having a horse fall on you. How do you feel, Jake?" "All right." "You're nice," Edna said to Mike. "Are you really a bankrupt?" "I'm a tremendous bankrupt," Mike said. "I owe money to everybody. Don't you owe any money?" "Tons." "I owe everybody money," Mike said. "I borrowed 100 pesetas from Montoya tonight." "The hell you did," I said. "I'll pay it back," Mike said. "I always pay everything back." "That's why you're a bankrupt, isn't it?" Edna said. I stood up. I had heard them talking from a long way away. It all seemed like some bad play. "I'm going over to the hotel," I said. Then I heard them talking about me. "Is he all right?" Edna asked. "We'd better walk with him." "I'm all right," I said. "Don't come. I'll see you all later." I walked away from the cafe. They were sitting at the table. I looked back at them and at the empty tables. There was a waiter sitting at one of the tables with his head in his hands. Walking across the square to the hotel, everything looked new and changed. I had never seen the trees before. I had never seen the flagpoles before, nor the front of the theater. It was all different. I felt as I felt once coming home from an out-of-town football game. I was carrying a suitcase with my football things in it, and I walked up the street from the station in the town I had lived in all my life, and it was all new. They were raking the lawns and burning leaves in the road, and I stopped for a long time and watched. It was all strange. Then I went on, and my feet seemed to be a long way off, and everything seemed to come from a long way off, and I could hear my feet walking a great distance away. I had been kicked in the head early in the game. It was like that crossing the square. It was like that going up the stairs in the hotel. Going up the stairs took a long time, and I had the feeling that I was carrying my suitcase. There was a light in the room. Bill came out and met me in the hall. "Say," he said, "go up and see Cohn. He's been in a jam, and he's asking for you." "The hell with him." "No." Go on. Go on up and see him." I did not want to climb another flight of stairs. "What are you looking at me that way for?" "I'm not looking at you." "Go on up and see Cohn. He's in bad shape." "You were drunk a little while ago," I said. "I'm drunk now," Bill said. "But you go up and see Cohn. He wants to see you." "All right," I said. It was just a matter of climbing more stairs. I went on up the stairs carrying my phantom suitcase. I walked down the hall to Cohn's room. The door was shut, and I knocked. "Who is it?" "Ms. Barnes." "Come in, Jake." I opened the door and went in and set down my suitcase. There was no light in the room. Cohen was lying, face down, on the bed in the dark. "Hello, Jake." Don't call me Jake." I stood by the door. It was just like this that I had come home. Now it was a hot bath that I needed, a deep hot bath to lie back in. "Where's the bathroom?" I asked. Cohen was crying. There he was, face down on the bed, crying. He had on a white polo shirt, the kind he'd worn at Princeton. "I'm sorry, Jake. Please forgive me." "Forgive you, hell. Please forgive me, Jake." I did not say anything. I stood there by the door. I was crazy. You must see how it was. "Oh, that's all right." I couldn't stand it about Brett. "You called me a pimp." I did not care. I wanted a hot bath. I wanted a hot bath in deep water. "I know. Please don't remember it." I was crazy. "That's all right." He was crying. His voice was funny. He lay there in his white shirt on the bed in the dark, his polo shirt. "I'm going away in the morning." He was crying without making any noise. I just couldn't stand it about Brett. I've been through hell, Jake. It's been simply hell. When I met her down here, Brett treated me as though I were a perfect stranger. I just couldn't stand it. We lived together at San Sebastian. I suppose you know it. I can't stand it anymore. He lay there on the bed. "Well," I said, "I'm going to take a bath. You were the only friend I had, and I loved Brett so." "Well," I said, "so long." "I guess it isn't any use," he said. "I guess it isn't any damn use." "What?" "Everything. Please say you forgive me, Jake." "Sure," I said. "It's all right." I felt so terribly. I've been through such hell, Jake. Now everything's gone. Everything. "Well," I said, "so long. I've got to go." He rolled over, sat on the edge of the bed, and then stood up. "So long, Jake," he said. "You'll shake hands, won't you?" "Sure. Why not?" We shook hands. In the dark, I could not see his face very well. "Well," I said, "see you in the morning." "I'm going away in the morning." "Oh, yes," I said. I went out. Cohen was standing in the door of the room. "Are you all right, Jake?" he asked. "Oh, yes," I said. "I'm all right." I could not find the bathroom. After a while, I found it. There was a deep stone tub. I turned on the taps and the water would not run. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub. When I got up to go, I found I had taken off my shoes. I hunted for them and found them and carried them downstairs. I found my room and went inside and undressed and got into bed. I woke with a headache and the noise of the bands going by in the street. I remembered I had promised to take Bill's friend Edna to see the bulls go through the street and into the ring. I dressed and went downstairs and out into the cold, early morning. People were crossing the square, hurrying toward the bull ring. Across the square were the two lines of men in front of the ticket booths. They were still waiting for the tickets to go on sale at 7 o'clock. I hurried across the street to the cafe. The waiter told me that my friends had been there and gone. How many were they? Mom. 2 gentlemen and a lady. That was all right. Bill and Mike were with Edna. She had been afraid last night they would pass out. That was why I was to be sure to take her. I drank the coffee and hurried with the other people toward the bull ring. I was not groggy now. There was only a bad headache. Everything looked sharp and clear, and the town smelt of the early morning. The stretch of ground from the edge of the town to the bull ring was muddy. There was a crowd all along the fence that led to the ring, and the outside balconies in the top of the bull ring were solid with people. I heard the rocket, and I knew I could not get into the ring in time to see the bulls come in, so I shoved through the crowd to the fence. I was pushed close against the planks of the fence. Between the two fences of the runway, the police were clearing the crowd along. They walked or trotted on into the bull ring. Then people commenced to come running. A drunk slipped and fell. 2 policemen grabbed him and rushed him over to the fence. The crowd were running fast now. There was a great shout from the crowd, and putting my head through between the boards, I saw the bulls just coming out of the street into the long running pen. They were going fast and gaining on the crowd. Just then another drunk started out from the fence with a blouse in his hands. He wanted to do cape work with the bulls. The 2 policemen tore out, collared him, one hit him with a club, and they dragged him against the fence and stood flattened out against the fence as the last of the crowd and the bulls went by. There were so many people running ahead of the bulls that the mass thickened and slowed up going through the gate into the ring, and as the bulls passed, galloping together, heavy, muddy-sided, horns swinging, one shot ahead, caught a man in the running crowd in the back and lifted him in the air. Both the man's arms were by his sides, his head went back as the horn went in, and the bull lifted him and then dropped him. The bull picked another man running in front, but the man disappeared into the crowd, and the crowd was through the gate and into the ring with the bulls behind them. The red door of the ring went shut. The crowd on the outside balconies of the bull ring were pressing through to the inside. There was a shout, then another shout. The man who had been gored lay face down in the trampled mud. People climbed over the fence, and I could not see the man because the crowd was so thick around him. From inside the ring came the shouts. Each shout meant a charge by some bull into the crowd. You could tell by the degree of intensity in the shout how bad a thing it was that was happening. Then the rocket went up that meant the steers had gotten the bulls out of the ring and into the corrals. I left the fence and started back toward the town. Back in the town, I went to the cafe to have a second coffee and some buttered toast. The waiters were sweeping out the cafe and mopping off the tables. One came over and took my order. Anything happened at the Encierro? I didn't see it all. One man was badly cogito. Where? Here I put one hand on the small of my back and the other on my chest, where it looked as though the horn must have come through. The waiter nodded his head and swept the crumbs from the table with his cloth. Badly cogito, he said, all for sport, all for pleasure. He went away and came back with the long-handled coffee in milk pots. He poured the milk and coffee. It came out of the long spouts in 2 streams into the big cup. The waiter nodded his head. Badly cogito through the back, he said. He put the pots down on the table and sat down in the chair at the table. A big horn wound. All for fun. Just for fun. What do you think of that? I don't know. That's it. All for fun. Fun, you understand. You're not an aficionado. Me? What are bulls? Animals. Brute animals. He stood up and put his hand on the small of his back, right through the back. A cornada right through the back. For fun, you understand. He shook his head and walked away, carrying the coffee pots. 2 men were going by in the street. The waiter shouted to them. They were grave-looking. One shook his head. Muerto, he called. The waiter nodded his head. The 2 men went on. They were on some errand. The waiter came over to my table. You hear? Muerto. Dead. He's dead. With a horn through him. All for morning fun. Es muy flamenco. It's bad. Not for me, the waiter said. No fun in that for me. Later in the day, we learned that the man who was killed was named Vicente Jarons and came from near Tafalla. The next day in the paper, we read that he was 28 years old and had a farm, a wife, and 2 children. He had continued to come to the fiesta each year after he was married. The next day, his wife came in from Tafalla to be with the body, and the day after there was a service in the chapel of San Fermin, and the coffin was carried to the railway station by members of the Dancing and Drinking Society of Tafalla. The drums marched ahead, and there was music on the fifes, and behind the men who carried the coffin walked the wife and 2 children. Behind them marched all the members of the Dancing and Drinking Societies of Pamplona, Estella, Tafalla, and Sanguisa, who could stay over for the funeral. The coffin was loaded into the baggage car of the train, and the widow and the 2 children rode, sitting all 3 together in an open 3rd-class railway carriage. The train started with a jerk, and then ran smoothly, going down grade around the edge of the plateau and out into the fields of grain that blew in the wind on the plain on the way to Tafalla. The bull who killed Vicente Jarons was named Boca Negra, was number 118 of the bull breeding establishment of Sanchez Tabimo, and was killed by Pedro Romero as the third bull of that same afternoon. His ear was cut by popular acclamation and given to Pedro Romero, who in turn gave it to Brett, who wrapped it in a handkerchief belonging to myself and left both ear and handkerchief, along with a number of Marathi cigarette stubs, shoved far back in the drawer of the bed table that stood beside her bed in the Hotel Montoya in Pamplona. Back in the hotel, the night watchman was sitting on a bench inside the door. He had been there all night and was very sleepy. He stood up as I came in. 3 of the waitresses came in at the same time. They had been to the morning show at the Bull Ring. They went upstairs laughing. I followed them upstairs and went into my room. I took off my shoes and lay down on the bed. The window was open onto the balcony and the sunlight was bright in the room. I did not feel sleepy. It must have been 3:30 when I had gone to bed and the bands had waked me at 6. My jaw was sore on both sides. I felt it with my thumb and fingers. That damn Cohen. He should have hit somebody the first time he was insulted and then gone away. He was so sure that Brett loved him. He was going to stay, and true love would conquer all. Someone knocked on the door. "Come in." It was Bill and Mike. They sat down on the bed. "Sumanciero," Bill said. "Sumanciero." "I say, weren't you there?" Mike asked. "Ring for some beer, Bill." "What a morning," Bill said. He mopped off his face. "My God, what a morning. And here's old Jake, the human punching bag." "What happened inside?" "Good God," Bill said. "What happened, Mike?" "There were these bulls coming in," Mike said. "Just ahead of them was the crowd, and some chap tripped and brought the whole lot of them down. And the bulls all came in right over them," Bill said. "I heard them yell." "That was Edna," Bill said. Chaps kept coming out and waving their shirts. One bull went along the barrera and hooked everybody over. "They took about 20 chaps to the infirmary," Mike said. "What a morning," Bill said. "The damn police kept arresting chaps that wanted to go and commit suicide with the bulls. The steers took them in the end," Mike said. "It took about an hour." "It was really about a quarter of an hour," Mike objected. "Oh, go to hell," Bill said. "You've been in the war. It was 2 hours and a half for me." "Where's that beer?" Mike asked. "What did you do with the lovely Edna?" "We took her home just now. She's gone to bed." "How did she like it?" "Fine. We told her it was just like that every morning." "She was impressed," Mike said. "She wanted us to go down in the ring, too," Bill said. "She likes action." "I said it wouldn't be fair to my creditors," Mike said. "What a morning," Bill said. "And what a night." "How's your jaw, Jake?" Mike asked. "Sore," I said. Bill laughed. "Why didn't you hit him with a chair?" "You can talk," Mike said. "He'd have knocked you out, too. I never saw him hit me. I rather think I saw him just before, and then quite suddenly I was sitting down in the street, and Jake was lying under a table." "Where did he go afterward?" I asked. "Here she is," Mike said. "Here's the beautiful lady with the beer." The chambermaid put the tray with the beer bottles and glasses down on the table. "Now bring up 3 more bottles," Mike said. "Where did Cohen go after he hit me?" I asked Bill. "Don't you know about that?" Mike was opening a beer bottle. He poured the beer into one of the glasses, holding the glass close to the bottle. "Really?" Bill asked. "Why, he went in and found Brett and the bullfighter chap in the bullfighter's room, and then he massacred the poor, bloody bullfighter." "No." "Yes." "What a night," Bill said. "He nearly killed the poor, bloody bullfighter. Then Cohen wanted to take Brett away. Wanted to make an honest woman of her, I imagine. Damn touching scene." He took a long drink of the beer. "He is an ass." "What happened?" Brett gave him what for. She told him off. I think she was rather good." "I'll bet she was," Bill said. Then Cohen broke down and cried and wanted to shake hands with the bullfighter fellow. He wanted to shake hands with Brett, too. I know. He shook hands with me. Did he? Well, they weren't having any of it. The bullfighter fellow was rather good. He didn't say much, but he kept getting up and getting knocked down again. Cohn couldn't knock him out. It must have been damned funny. Where did you hear all this? Brett. I saw her this morning. What happened finally? It seems the bullfighter fellow was sitting on the bed. He'd been knocked down about 15 times, and he wanted to fight some more. Brett held him and wouldn't let him get up. He was weak, but Brett couldn't hold him. And he got up. Then Cohn said he wouldn't hit him again. Said he couldn't do it. Said it would be wicked. So the bullfighter chap sort of rather staggered over to him. Cohn went back against the wall. So you won't hit me? No, said Cohn. I'd be ashamed to. So the bullfighter fellow hit him just as hard as he could in the face and then sat down on the floor. He couldn't get up, Brett said. Cohn wanted to pick him up and carry him to the bed. He said if Cohn helped him, he'd kill him. And he'd kill him anyway this morning if Cohn wasn't out of town. Cohn was crying, and Brett had told him off, and he wanted to shake hands. I've told you that before. Tell the rest, Bill said. It seems the bullfighter chap was sitting on the floor. He was waiting to get strength enough to get up and hit Cohn again. Brett wasn't having any shaking hands, and Cohn was crying and telling her how much he loved her. And she was telling him not to be a ruddy ass. Then Cohn leaned down to shake hands with the bullfighter fellow. No hard feelings, you know, all for forgiveness. And the bullfighter chap hit him in the face again. That's quite a kid, Bill said. He ruined Cohn, Mike said. You know I don't think Cohn will ever want to knock people about again. When did you see Brett? This morning. She came in to get some things. She's looking after this Romero lad. He poured out another bottle of beer. Brett's rather cut up, but she loves looking after people. That's how we came to go off together. She was looking after me. I know, I said. I'm rather drunk, Mike said. I think I'll stay rather drunk. This is all awfully amusing, but it's not too pleasant. It's not too pleasant for me. He drank off the beer. I gave Brett what for, you know. I said if she would go about with Jews and bullfighters and such people, she must expect trouble. He leaned forward. I say, Jake, do you mind if I drink that bottle of yours? She'll bring you another one. Please, I said. I wasn't drinking it anyway. Mike started to open the bottle. Would you mind opening it? I pressed up the wire fastener and poured it for him. You know, Mike went on, Brett was rather good. She's always rather good. I gave her a fearful hiding about Jews and bullfighters and all those sort of people, and do you know what she said? Yes. I've had such a hell of a happy life with the British aristocracy. He took a drink. That was rather good. Ashley chap she got the title from was a sailor, you know. 9th Baronet. When he came home, he wouldn't sleep in a bed. Always made Brett sleep on the floor. Finally, when he got really bad, he used to tell her he'd kill her. Always slept with a loaded service revolver. Brett used to take the shells out when he'd gone to sleep. She hasn't had an absolutely happy life. Brett. Damned shame, too. She enjoys things so. He stood up. His hand was shaky. I'm going in the room. Try and get a little sleep. He smiled. We go too long without sleep in these fiestas. I'm going to start now and get plenty of sleep. Damn bad thing not to get sleep. Makes you frightfully nervy. We'll see you at noon at the Aruna, Bill said. Mike went out the door. We heard him in the next room. He rang the bell and the chambermaid came and knocked at the door. Bring up 6 bottles of beer and a bottle of Fundador, Mike told her. Si, Senorito. I'm going to bed, Bill said. Poor old Mike. I had a hell of a row about him last night. Where? At that Milano place. Yes. There was a fellow there that had helped pay Brett and Mike out of cans once. He was damned nasty. I know the story. I didn't. Nobody ought to have a right to say things about Mike. That's what makes it bad. They oughtn't to have any right. I wish to hell they didn't have any right. I'm going to bed. Was anybody killed in the ring? I don't think so. Just badly hurt. A man was killed outside in the runway. Was there, said Bill. Chapter 18. At noon we were all at the cafe. It was crowded. We were eating shrimps and drinking beer. The town was crowded. Every street was full. Big motor cars from Biarritz and San Sebastian kept driving up and parking around the square. They brought people for the bullfight. Sightseeing cars came up too. There was one with 25 English women in it. They sat in the big white car and looked through their glasses at the fiesta. The dancers were all quite drunk. It was the last day of the fiesta. The fiesta was solid and unbroken, but the motor cars and tourist cars made little islands of onlookers. When the cars emptied, the onlookers were absorbed into the crowd. You did not see them again, except as sport clothes, odd looking at a table among the closely packed peasants in black smocks. The fiesta absorbed even the Biarritz English, so that you did not see them unless you passed close to a table. All the time there was music in the street. The drums kept on pounding and the pipes were going. Inside the cafes, men with their hands gripping the table or on each other's shoulders were singing the hard-voiced singing. Here comes Brett, Bill said. I looked and saw her coming through the crowd in the square, walking, her head up, as though the fiesta were being staged in her honor, and she found it pleasant and amusing. Hello, you chaps, she said. I say I have a thirst. Get another big beer, Bill said to the waiter. Shrimps. Meh. Is Cone gone, Brett asked. Yes, Bill said. He hired a car. The beer came. Brett started to lift the glass mug and her hand shook. She saw it and smiled and leaned forward and took a long sip. Good beer. Very good, I said. I was nervous about Mike. I did not think he had slept. He must have been drinking all the time, but he seemed to be under control. I heard Cohen had hurt you, Jake, Brett said. No, knocked me out. That was all. I say, he did hurt Pedro Romero, Brett said. He hurt him most badly. How is he? He'll be all right. He won't go out of the room. Does he look badly? Very. He was really hurt. I told him I wanted to pop out and see you chaps for a minute. Is he going to fight? Rather. I'm going with you, if you don't mind. How's your boyfriend, Mike asked. He had not listened to anything that Brett had said. Brett's got a bullfighter, he said. She had a Jew named Cohen, but he turned out badly. Brett stood up. I am not going to listen to that sort of rot from you, Michael. How's your boyfriend? Damned well, Brett said. Watch him this afternoon. Brett's got a bullfighter, Mike said. A beautiful, bloody bullfighter. Would you mind walking over with me? I want to talk to you, Jake. Tell him all about your bullfighter, Mike said. Oh, to hell with your bullfighter. He tipped the table so that all the beers and the dish of shrimps went over at a crash. Come on, Brett said. Let's get out of this. In the crowd crossing the square, I said, how is it? I'm not going to see him after lunch until the fight. His people come in and dress him. They're very angry about me, he says. Brett was radiant. She was happy. The sun was out and the day was bright. I feel altogether changed, Brett said. You've no idea, Jake. Anything you want me to do? No, just go to the fight with me. We'll see you at lunch. No, I'm eating with him. We were standing under the arcade at the door of the hotel. They were carrying tables out and setting them up under the arcade. Want to take a turn out to the park, Brett asked. I don't want to go up yet. I fancy he's sleeping. We walked along past the theater and out of the square and along through the barracks of the fair, moving with the crowd between the lines of booths. We came out on a cross street that led to the Paseo de Sarasate. We could see the crowd walking there, all the fashionably dressed people. They were making the turn at the upper end of the park. Don't, let's go there, Brett said. I don't want staring at just now. We stood in the sunlight. It was hot and good after the rain and the clouds from the sea. I hope the wind goes down, Brett said. It's very bad for him. So do I. He says the bowls are all right. They're good. Though, is that San Fermin's? Brett looked at the yellow wall of the chapel. Yes, where the show started on Sunday. Let's go in. Do you mind? I'd rather like to pray a little for him or something. We went in through the heavy leather door that moved very lightly. It was dark inside. Many people were praying. You saw them as your eyes adjusted themselves to the half-light. We knelt at one of the long wooden benches. After a little, I felt Brett stiffen beside me and saw she was looking straight ahead. Come on, she whispered throatily. Let's get out of here. Makes me damned nervous. Outside in the hot brightness of the street, Brett looked up at the treetops in the wind. The praying had not been much of a success. Don't know why I get so nervy in church, Brett said. Never does me any good. We walked along. I'm damn bad for a religious atmosphere, Brett said. I've the wrong type of face. You know, Brett said, I'm not worried about him at all. I just feel happy about him. Good. I wish the wind would drop, though. It's liable to go down by 5 o'clock. Let's hope. You might pray, I laughed. Never does me any good. I've never gotten anything I prayed for. Have you? Oh, yes. Oh, rot, said Brett. Maybe it works for some people, though. You don't look very religious, Jake. I'm pretty religious. Oh, rot, said Brett. Don't start proselyting today. Today's going to be bad enough as it is. It was the first time I had seen her in the old happy, careless way since before she went off with Cone. We were back again in front of the hotel. All the tables were set now and already several were filled with people eating. Do look after Mike, Brett said. Don't let him get too bad. Your friend's half gone upstairs, the German maitre d' hotel said in English. He was a continual eavesdropper. Brett turned to him. Thank you so much. Have you anything else to say? No, Ma, I am. Good, said Brett. Save us a table for 3, I said to the German. He smiled his dirty little pink and white smile. I says, Madam, eating here. No, Brett said. Den I think a table for 2 will be enough. Don't talk to him, Brett said. Mike must have been in bad shape, she said on the stairs. We passed Montoya on the stairs. He bowed and did not smile. I'll see you at the cafe, Brett said. Thank you so much, Jake. We had stopped at the floor our rooms were on. She went straight down the hall and into Romero's room. She did not knock. She simply opened the door, went in, and closed it behind her. I stood in front of the door of Mike's room and knocked. There was no answer. I tried the knob and it opened. Inside the room was in great disorder. All the bags were opened and clothing was strewn around. There were empty bottles beside the bed. Mike lay on the bed looking like a death mask of himself. He opened his eyes and looked at me. Hello, Jake, he said very slowly. I'm getting a little sleep. I've wanted a little sleep for a long time. Let me cover you over. No, I'm quite warm. Don't go. I haven't got 10 to sleep yet. You'll sleep, Mike. Don't worry, boy. Brett's got a bullfighter, Mike said, but her Jew has gone away. He turned his head and looked at me. Damned good thing. What? Yes. Now go to sleep, Mike. You ought to get some sleep. I'm just starting. I'm going to get a little sleep. He shut his eyes. I went out of the room and turned the door to quietly. Bill was in my room reading the paper. See, Mike. Yes. Let's go and eat. I won't eat downstairs with that German head waiter. He was damned snotty when I was getting Mike upstairs. He was snotty to us too. Let's go out and eat in the town. We went down the stairs. On the stairs we passed a girl coming up with a covered tray. There goes Brett's lunch, Bill said. And the kids, I said. Outside on the terrace under the arcade, the German head waiter came up. His red cheeks were shiny. He was being polite. "I have a table for two for you gentlemen," he said. "Go sit at it," Bill said. We went on out across the street. We ate at a restaurant in a side street off the square. They were all men eating in the restaurant. It was full of smoke and drinking and singing. The food was good and so was the wine. We did not talk much. Afterward, we went to the cafe and watched the fiesta come to the boiling point. Brett came over soon after lunch. She said she had looked in the room and that Mike was asleep. When the fiesta boiled over and toward the bull ring, we went with the crowd. Brett sat at the ringside between Bill and me. Directly below us was the collegion, the passageway between the stands and the red fence of the Barrera. Behind us, the concrete stands filled solidly. Out in front, beyond the red fence, the sand of the ring was smooth, rolled, and yellow. It looked a little heavy from the rain, but it was dry in the sun and firm and smooth. The sword handlers and bull ring servants came down the collegion carrying on their shoulders the wicker baskets of fighting capes and muletas. They were blood-stained and compactly folded and packed in the baskets. The sword handlers opened the heavy leather sword cases so the red-wrapped hilts of the sheaf of swords showed as the leather case leaned against the fence. They unfolded the dark, stained red flannel of the mulatas and fixed batons in them to spread the stuff and give the matador something to hold. Brett watched it all. She was absorbed in the professional details. "He's his name stenciled on all the capes and mulatas," she said. "Why do they call them muletas?" "I don't know. I wonder if they ever launder them." "I don't think so. It might spoil the color." "The blood must stiffen them," Bill said. "Funny," Brett said. "How one doesn't mind the blood." Below, in the narrow passage of the collegion, the sword handlers arranged everything. All the seats were full. Above, all the boxes were full. There was not an empty seat except in the president's box. When he came in, the fight would start. Across the smooth sand, in the high doorway that led into the corrals, the bullfighters were standing, their arms furled in their capes, talking, waiting for the signal to march in across the arena. Brett was watching them with the glasses. "Here, would you like to look?" I looked through the glasses and saw the three matadors. Romero was in the center, Belmonte on his left, Marshall on his right. Back of them were their people, and behind the banderilleros, back in the passageway, and in the open space of the corral, I saw the picadors. Romero was wearing a black suit. His tri-cornered hat was low down over his eyes. I could not see his face clearly under the hat, but it looked badly marked. He was looking straight ahead. Marshall was smoking a cigarette guardedly, holding it in his hand. Belmonte looked ahead, his face wan and yellow, his long wolf jaw out. He was looking at nothing. Neither he nor Romero seemed to have anything in common with the others. They were all alone. The president came in. There was hand-clapping above us in the grandstand, and I handed the glasses to Brett. There was applause. The music started. Brett looked through the glasses. "Here, take them," she said. Through the glasses, I saw Belmonte speak to Romero. Marshall straightened up and dropped his cigarette, and looking straight ahead, their heads back, their free arms swinging, the three matadors walked out. Behind them came all the procession, opening out, all striding in step, all the capes furled, everybody with free arms swinging, and behind rode the picadors, their picks rising like lances. Behind all came the two trains of mules and the bull-ring servants. The matadors bowed, holding their hats on, before the president's box, and then came over to the Barrera below us. Pedro Romero took off his heavy gold brocaded cape and handed it over the fence to his sword handler. He said something to the sword handler. Close below us, we saw Romero's lips were puffed. Both eyes were discolored. His face was discolored and swollen. The sword handler took the cape, looked up at Brett, and came over to us and handed up the cape. "Spread it out in front of you," I said. Brett leaned forward. The cape was heavy and smoothly stiff with gold. The sword handler looked back, shook his head, and said something. A man beside me leaned over toward Brett. "He doesn't want you to spread it," he said. "You should fold it and keep it in your lap." Brett folded the heavy cape. Romero did not look up at us. He was speaking to Belmonte. Belmonte had sent his formal cape over to some friends. He looked across at them and smiled, his wolf smile that was only with the mouth. Romero leaned over the Barrera and asked for the water jug. The sword handler brought it, and Romero poured water over the percale of his fighting cape and then scuffed the lower folds in the sand with his slippered foot. "What's that for?" Brett asked. "To give it weight in the wind." "His face looks bad," Bill said. "He feels very badly," Brett said. "He should be in bed." The first bull was Belmonte's. Belmonte was very good, but because he got 30,000 pesetas and people had stayed in line all night to buy tickets to see him, the crowd demanded that he should be more than very good. Belmonte's great attraction is working close to the bull. In bullfighting, they speak of the terrain of the bull and the terrain of the bullfighter. As long as a bullfighter stays in his own terrain, he is comparatively safe. Each time he enters into the terrain of the bull, he is in great danger. Belmonte, in his best days, worked always in the terrain of the bull. This way he gave the sensation of coming tragedy. People went to the corrida to see Belmonte, to be given tragic sensations, and perhaps to see the death of Belmonte. 15 years ago, they said if you wanted to see Belmonte, you should go quickly, while he was still alive. Since then, he has killed more than 1,000 bulls. When he retired, the legend grew up about how his bullfighting had been. And when he came out of retirement, the public were disappointed because no real man could work as close to the bulls as Belmonte was supposed to have done. Not, of course, even Belmonte. Also, Belmonte imposed conditions and insisted that his bulls should not be too large, nor too dangerously armed with horns. And so the element that was necessary to give the sensation of tragedy was not there, and the public, who wanted 3 times as much from Belmonte, who was sick with a fistula, as Belmonte had ever been able to give, felt defrauded and cheated, and Belmonte's jaw came further out in contempt, and his face turned yellower, and he moved with greater difficulty as his pain increased, and finally the crowd were actively against him. And he was utterly contemptuous and indifferent. He had meant to have a great afternoon, and instead it was an afternoon of sneers, shouted insults, and finally a volley of cushions and pieces of bread and vegetables thrown down at him in the plaza where he had had his greatest triumphs. His jaw only went further out. Sometimes he turned to smile, that toothed, long-jawed, lipless smile, when he was called something particularly insulting, and always the pain that any movement produced grew stronger and stronger, until finally his yellow face was parchment color. And after his second bull was dead, and the throwing of bread and cushions was over, after he had saluted the president with the same wolf-jawed smile and contemptuous eyes, and handed his sword over the barrera to be wiped and put back in its case, he passed through into the Calajon and leaned on the barrera below us, his head on his arms, not seeing, not hearing anything, only going through his pain. When he looked up, finally he asked for a drink of water. He swallowed a little, rinsed his mouth, spat the water, took his cape, and went back into the ring. Because they were against Belmonte, the public were for Romero. From the moment he left the barrera and went toward the bull, they applauded him. Belmonte watched Romero too, watched him always without seeming to. He paid no attention to Marshall. Marshall was the sort of thing he knew all about. He had come out of retirement to compete with Marshall, knowing it was a competition gained in advance. He had expected to compete with Marshall and the other stars of the decadence of bullfighting, and he knew that the sincerity of his own bullfighting would be so set off by the false aesthetics of the bullfighters of the decadent period that he would only have to be in the ring. His return from retirement had been spoiled by Romero. Romero did always smoothly, calmly, and beautifully what he, Belmonte, could only bring himself to do now sometimes. The crowd felt it. Even the people from Biarritz, even the American ambassador saw it finally. It was a competition that Belmonte would not enter because it would lead only to a bad horn wound or death. Belmonte was no longer well enough. He no longer had his greatest moments in the bull ring. He was not sure that there were any great moments. Things were not the same, and now life only came in flashes. He had flashes of the old greatness with his bulls, but they were not of value because he had discounted them in advance when he had picked the bulls out for their safety, getting out of a motor and leaning on a fence, looking over at the herd on the ranch of his friend the bull breeder. So he had 2 small, manageable bulls without much horns, and when he felt the greatness again coming, just a little of it through the pain that was always with him, it had been discounted and sold in advance, and it did not give him a good feeling. It was the greatness, but it did not make bullfighting wonderful to him anymore. Pedro Romero had the greatness. He loved bullfighting, and I think he loved the bulls, and I think he loved Brett, everything of which he could control the locality he did in front of her all that afternoon. Never once did he look up. He made it stronger that way, and did it for himself too, as well as for her. because he did not look up to ask if it pleased. He did it all for himself inside, and it strengthened him, and yet he did it for her, too. But he did not do it for her at any loss to himself. He gained by it all through the afternoon. His first quite was directly below us. The three matadors take the bull in turn after each charge he makes at a picador. Belmonte was the first, Marshall was the second. Then came Romero. The three of them were standing at the left of the horse. The picador, his hat down over his eyes, the shaft of his pick angling sharply toward the bull, kicked in the spurs and held them, and with the reins in his left hand walked the horse forward toward the bull. The bull was watching. Seemingly he watched the white horse, but really he watched the triangular steel point of the pick. Romero, watching, saw the bull start to turn his head. He did not want to charge. Romero flicked his cape so the color caught the bull's eye. The bull charged with the reflex, charged and found not the flash of color but a white horse, and a man leaned far over the horse, shot the steel point of the long hickory shaft into the hump of muscle on the bull's shoulder, and pulled his horse sideways as he pivoted on the pick, making a wound, and forcing the iron into the bull's shoulder, making him bleed for Belmonte. The bull did not insist under the iron. He did not really want to get at the horse. He turned, and the group broke apart, and Romero was taking him out with his cape. He took him out softly and smoothly, and then stopped, and standing squarely in front of the bull, offered him the cape. The bull's tail went up and he charged, and Romero moved his arms ahead of the bull, wheeling, his feet firmed. The dampened, mud-weighted cape swung open, and full as a sail fills, and Romero pivoted with it just ahead of the bull. At the end of the pass they were facing each other again. Romero smiled. The bull wanted it again, and Romero's cape filled again, this time on the other side. Each time he let the bull pass so close that the man and the bull and the cape that filled and pivoted ahead of the bull were all one sharply etched mass. It was all so slow and so controlled. It was as though he were rocking the bull to sleep. He made 4 Veronicas like that, and finished with a half Veronica that turned his back on the bull, and came away toward the applause, his hand on his hip, his cape on his arm, and the bull watching his back going away. In his own bulls he was perfect. His first bull did not see well. After the first 2 passes with the cape, Romero knew exactly how bad the vision was impaired. He worked accordingly. It was not brilliant bullfighting. It was only perfect bullfighting. The crowd wanted the bull changed. They made a great row. Nothing very fine could happen with a bull that could not see the lures, but the president would not order him replaced. "Why don't they change him?" Brett asked. "They've paid for him. They don't want to lose their money." "It's hardly fair to Romero. Watch how he handles a bull that can't see the color. It's the sort of thing I don't like to see." It was not nice to watch if you cared anything about the person who was doing it. With the bull who could not see the colors of the capes, or the scarlet flannel of the muleta, Romero had to make the bull consent with his body. He had to get so close that the bull saw his body and would start for it, and then shift the bull's charge to the flannel and finish out the pass in the classic manner. The Biarritz crowd did not like it. They thought Romero was afraid, and that was why he gave that little sidestep each time as he transferred the bull's charge from his own body to the flannel. They preferred Belmonte's imitation of himself or Marshall's imitation of Belmonte. There were 3 of them in the row behind us. "What's he afraid of the bull for? The bull's so dumb he only goes after the cloth. He's just a young bullfighter. He hasn't learned it yet." "But I thought he was fine with the cape before." "Probably he's nervous now." Out in the center of the ring, all alone, Romero was going on with the same thing, getting so close that the bull could see him plainly, offering the body, offering it again a little closer, the bull watching dully, then so close that the bull thought he had him, offering again and finally drawing the charge, and then, just before the horns came, giving the bull the red cloth to follow with that little, almost imperceptible, jerk that so offended the critical judgment of the Biarritz bullfight experts. "He's going to kill now," I said to Brett. "The bull's still strong. He wouldn't wear himself out." Out in the center of the ring, Romero profiled in front of the bull, drew the sword out from the folds of the muleta, rose on his toes and sighted along the blade. The bull charged as Romero charged. Romero's left hand dropped the muleta over the bull's muzzle to blind him. His left shoulder went forward between the horns as the sword went in, and for just an instant he and the bull were one, Romero way out over the bull. The right arm extended high up to where the hilt of the sword had gone in between the bull's shoulders. Then the figure was broken. There was a little jolt as Romero came clear, and then he was standing, one hand up, facing the bull, his shirt ripped out from under his sleeve, the white blowing in the wind, and the bull, the red sword hilt tight between his shoulders, his head going down and his legs settling. "There he goes," Bill said. Romero was close enough so the bull could see him. His hand still up, he spoke to the bull. The bull gathered himself, then his head went forward, and he went over slowly, then all over, suddenly 4 feet in the air. They handed the sword to Romero, and carrying it blade down, the muleta in his other hand, he walked over to in front of the president's box, bowed, straightened, and came over to the barrera and handed over the sword and muleta. "Bad one," said the sword handler. "He made me sweat," said Romero. He wiped off his face. The sword handler handed him the water jug. Romero wiped his lips. It hurt him to drink out of the jug. He did not look up at us. Marshall had a big day. They were still applauding him when Romero's last bull came in. It was the bull that had sprinted out and killed the man in the morning running. During Romero's first bull, his hurt face had been very noticeable. Everything he did showed it. All the concentration of the awkwardly delicate working with the bull that could not see well brought it out. The fight with Cohen had not touched his spirit, but his face had been smashed and his body hurt. He was wiping all that out now. Each thing that he did with this bull wiped that out a little cleaner. It was a good bull, a big bull, and with horns, and it turned and recharged easily and surely. He was what Romero wanted in bulls. When he had finished his work with the muleta and was ready to kill, the crowd made him go on. They did not want the bull killed yet. They did not want it to be over. Romero went on. It was like a course in bull fighting. All the passes he linked up, all completed, all slow, templed, and smooth. There were no tricks and no mystifications. There was no brusqueness, and each pass as it reached the summit gave you a sudden ache inside. The crowd did not want it ever to be finished. The bull was squared on all 4 feet to be killed, and Romero killed directly below us. He killed not as he had been forced to by the last bull, but as he wanted to. He profiled directly in front of the bull, drew the sword out of the folds of the muleta, and sighted along the blade. The bull watched him. Romero spoke to the bull and tapped one of his feet. The bull charged and Romero waited for the charge. The muleta held low, sighting along the blade, his feet firm. Then, without taking a step forward, he became one with the bull. The sword was in high between the shoulders. The bull had followed the low-swung flannel. That disappeared as Romero lurched clear to the left, and it was over. The bull tried to go forward. His legs commenced to settle. He swung from side to side, hesitated, then went down on his knees, and Romero's older brother leaned forward behind him and drove a short knife into the bull's neck at the base of the horns. The first time he missed. He drove the knife in again, and the bull went over, twitching and rigid. Romero's brother, holding the bull's horn in one hand, the knife in the other, looked up at the president's box. Handkerchiefs were waving all over the bull ring. The president looked down from the box and waved his handkerchief. The brother cut the notched black ear from the dead bull and trotted over with it to Romero. The bull lay heavy and black on the sand, his tongue out. Boys were running toward him from all parts of the arena, making a little circle around him. They were starting to dance around the bull. Romero took the ear from his brother and held it up toward the president. The president bowed and Romero, running to get ahead of the crowd, came toward us. He leaned up against the barrera and gave the ear to Brett. He nodded his head and smiled. The crowd were all about him. Brett held down the cape. "You liked it," Romero called. Brett did not say anything. They looked at each other and smiled. Brett had the ear in her hand. "Don't get bloody," Romero said, and grinned. The crowd wanted him. Several boys shouted at Brett. The crowd was the boys, the dancers, and the drunks. Romero turned and tried to get through the crowd. They were all around him, trying to lift him and put him on their shoulders. He fought and twisted away and started running, in the midst of them, toward the exit. He did not want to be carried on people's shoulders. But they held him and lifted him. It was uncomfortable and his legs were spraddled and his body was very sore. They were lifting him and all running toward the gate. He had his hand on somebody's shoulder. He looked around at us apologetically. The crowd, running, went out the gate with him. We all three went back to the hotel. Brett went upstairs. Bill and I sat in the downstairs dining room and ate some hard-boiled eggs and drank several bottles of beer. Belmonte came down in his street clothes with his manager and 2 other men. They sat at the next table and ate. Belmonte ate very little. They were leaving on the 7 o'clock train for Barcelona. Belmonte wore a blue-striped shirt and a dark suit and ate soft boiled eggs. The others ate a big meal. Belmonte did not talk. He only answered questions. Bill was tired after the bullfight. So was I. We both took a bullfight very hard. We sat and ate the eggs, and I watched Belmonte and the people at his table. The men with him were tough-looking and businesslike. "Come on over to the cafe," Bill said. "I want an absinthe." It was the last day of the fiesta. Outside it was beginning to be cloudy again. The square was full of people, and the fireworks experts were making up their set pieces for the night and covering them over with beech branches. Boys were watching. We passed stands of rockets with long bamboo stems. Outside the cafe there was a great crowd. The music and the dancing were going on. The giants and the dwarfs were passing. "Where's Edna?" I asked Bill. "I don't know." We watched the beginning of the evening of the last night of the fiesta. The absinthe made everything seem better. I drank it without sugar in the dripping glass, and it was pleasantly bitter. "I feel sorry about Cone," Bill said. "He had an awful time." "Oh, to hell with Cone," I said. "Where do you suppose he went?" "Up to Paris." "What do you suppose he'll do?" "Oh, to hell with him." "What do you suppose he'll do?" "Pick up with his old girl, probably." "Who was his old girl?" "Somebody named Frances." We had another absinthe. "When do you go back?" I asked. "Tomorrow." After a little while Bill said, "Well, it was a swell fiesta." "Yes," I said, "something doing all the time. You wouldn't believe it. It's like a wonderful nightmare." "Sure," I said. "I'd believe anything, including nightmares." "What's the matter? Feel low?" "Low as hell." "No." "Have another absinthe." "Here, waiter. Another absinthe for this singer." "I feel like hell," I said. "Drink that," said Bill. "Drink it slow." It was beginning to get dark. The fiesta was going on. I began to feel drunk, but I did not feel any better. "How do you feel?" "I feel like hell." "Have another." "It won't do any good." "Try it. You can't tell, maybe this is the one that gets it." "Hey, waiter, another absinthe for this senor." I poured the water directly into it and stirred it instead of letting it drip. Bill put in a lump of ice. I stirred the ice around with a spoon in the brownish, cloudy mixture. "How is it?" "Fine." "Don't drink it fast that way. It will make you sick." I set down the glass. I had not meant to drink it fast. "I feel tight." "You ought to." "That's what you wanted, wasn't it?" "Sure. Get tight. Get over your damn depression." "Well, I'm tight. Is that what you want?" "Sit down." "I won't sit down," I said. "I'm going over to the hotel." I was very drunk. I was drunker than I ever remembered having been. At the hotel, I went upstairs. Brett's door was open. I put my head in the room. Mike was sitting on the bed. He waved a bottle. "Jake," he said. "Come in, Jake." I went in and sat down. The room was unstable unless I looked at some fixed point. "Brett, you know, she's gone off with the bullfighter chap." "No." "Yes, she looked for you to say goodbye. They went on the 7 o'clock train." "Did they?" "Bad thing to do," Mike said. "She shouldn't have done it." "No." "Have a drink? Wait while I ring for some beer." "I'm drunk," I said. "I'm going in and lie down." "Are you blind?" I was blind myself. "Yes," I said. "I'm blind." "Well, bungo," Mike said. "Get some sleep, old Jake." I went out the door and into my own room and lay on the bed. The bed went sailing off and I sat up in bed and looked at the wall to make it stop. Outside in the square the fiesta was going on. It did not mean anything. Later, Bill and Mike came in to get me to go down and eat with them. I pretended to be asleep. He's asleep. Better let him alone. He's blind as a tick, Mike said. They went out. I got up and went to the balcony and looked out at the dancing in the square. The world was not wheeling anymore. It was just very clear and bright and inclined to blur at the edges. I washed, brushed my hair. I looked strange to myself in the glass and went downstairs to the dining room. Here he is, said Bill. Good old Jake. I knew you wouldn't pass out. Hello, you old drunk, Mike said. I got hungry and woke up. Eat some soup, Bill said. The three of us sat at the table, and it seemed as though about 6 people were missing. Book 3. Chapter 19. In the morning it was all over. The fiesta was finished. I woke about 9 o'clock, had a bath, dressed, and went downstairs. The square was empty, and there were no people on the streets. A few children were picking up rocket sticks in the square. The cafes were just opening, and the waiters were carrying out the comfortable white wicker chairs and arranging them around the marble-top tables in the shade of the arcade. They were sweeping the streets and sprinkling them with a hose. I sat in one of the wicker chairs and leaned back comfortably. The waiter was in no hurry to come. The white paper announcements of the unloading of the bulls and the big schedules of special trains were still up on the pillars of the arcade. A waiter wearing a blue apron came out with a bucket of water and a cloth and commenced to tear down the notices, pulling the paper off in strips and washing and rubbing away the paper that stuck to the stone. The fiesta was over. I drank a coffee, and after a while Bill came over. I watched him come walking across the square. He sat down at the table and ordered a coffee. Well, he said, it's all over. Yes, I said. When do you go? I don't know. We better get a car, I think. Aren't you going back to Paris? No, I can stay away another week. I think I'll go to San Sebastian. I want to get back. What's Mike going to do? He's going to St. Jean-de-Luz. Let's get a car and I'll go as far as Bayonne. You can get the train up from there tonight. Good. Let's go after lunch. All right. I'll get the car. We had lunch and paid the bill. Montoya did not come near us. One of the maids brought the bill. The car was outside. The chauffeur piled and strapped the bags on top of the car and put them in beside him in the front seat, and we got in. The car went out of the square, along through the side streets, out under the trees and down the hill and away from Pamplona. It did not seem like a very long ride. Mike had a bottle of Fundador. I only took a couple of drinks. We came over the mountains and out of Spain and down the white roads and through the overfoliaged, wet, green Basque country and finally into Bayonne. We left Bill's baggage at the station and he bought a ticket to Paris. His train left at 7:10. We came out of the station. The car was standing out in front. What shall we do about the car? Bill asked. Oh, bother the car, Mike said. Let's just keep the car with us. All right, Bill said. Where shall we go? Let's go to Biarritz and have a drink. Old Mike the spender, Bill said. We drove into Biarritz and left the car outside a very Ritz place. We went into the bar and sat on high stools and drank a whiskey and soda. That drink's mine, Mike said. Let's roll for it. So we rolled poker dice out of a deep leather dice cup. Bill was out first roll. Mike lost to me and handed the bartender a 100-franc note. The whiskeys were 12 francs apiece. We had another round and Mike lost again. Each time he gave the bartender a good tip. In a room off the bar there was a good jazz band playing. It was a pleasant bar. We had another round. I went out on the first roll with 4 kings. Bill and Mike rolled. Mike won the first roll with 4 jacks. Bill won the second. On the final roll Mike had 3 kings and let them stay. He handed the dice cup to Bill. Bill rattled them and rolled, and there were 3 kings, an ace, and a queen. It's yours, Mike, Bill said. Old Mike the gambler. I'm so sorry, Mike said. I can't get it. What's the matter? I've no money, Mike said. I'm stony. I've just 20 francs. Here, take 20 francs. Bill's face sort of changed. I just had enough to pay Montoya. Damned lucky to have it, too. I'll cash you a check, Bill said. That's damned nice of you. But you see, I can't write checks. What are you going to do for money? Oh, some will come through. I've 2 weeks' allowance should be here. I can live on tip at this pub in St. John. What do you want to do about the car? Bill asked me. Do you want to keep it on? It doesn't make any difference. Seems sort of idiotic. Come on. Let's have another drink, Mike said. Fine. This one is on me, Bill said. Has Brett any money? He turned to Mike. I shouldn't think so. She put up most of what I gave to old Montoya. She hasn't any money with her, I asked. I shouldn't think so. She never has any money. She gets 500 quid a year and pays 350 of it in interest to Jews. I suppose they get it at the source, said Bill. Quite. They're not really Jews. We just call them Jews. They're Scotsmen, I believe. Hasn't she any at all with her? I asked. I hardly think so. She gave it all to me when she left. Well, Bill said, we might as well have another drink. Damned good idea, Mike said. One never gets anywhere by discussing finances. No, said Bill. Bill and I rolled for the next 2 rounds. Bill lost and paid. We went out to the car. Anywhere you'd like to go, Bill asked. Let's take a drive. It might do my credit good. Let's drive about a little. Fine. I'd like to see the coast. Let's drive down toward Henday. I haven't any credit along the coast. You can't ever tell, said Bill. We drove out along the coast road. There was the green of the headlands, the white, red-roofed villas, patches of forest, and the ocean very blue with the tide out and the water curling far out along the beach. We drove through St. Jean de Luz and passed through villages farther down the coast. Back of the rolling country we were going through, we saw the mountains we had come over from Pamplona. The road went on ahead. Bill looked at his watch. It was time for us to go back. He knocked on the glass and told the driver to turn around. The driver backed the car out into the grass to turn it. In back of us were the woods, below a stretch of meadow, then the sea. At the hotel where Mike was going to stay in St. Jean, we stopped the car and he got out. The chauffeur carried in his bags. Mike stood by the side of the car. Goodbye, you chaps, Mike said. It was a damned fine fiesta. So long, Bill said. I'll see you around, I said. Don't worry about money, Mike said. You can pay for the car, Jake, and I'll send you my share. So long, Mike. So long, you chaps. You've been damned nice. We all shook hands. We waved from the car to Mike. He stood in the road watching. We got to Bayonne just before the train left. A porter carried Bill's bags in from the consign. I went as far as the inner gate to the tracks. So long, fella, Bill said. So long, kid. It was swell. I've had a swell time. Will you be in Paris? No, I have to sail on the 17th. So long, fella. So long, old kid. He went in through the gate to the train. The porter went ahead with the bags. I watched the train pull out. Bill was at one of the windows. The window passed, the rest of the train passed, and the tracks were empty. I went outside to the car. How much do we owe you? I asked the driver. The price to Bayonne had been fixed at 150 pesetas. 200 pesetas. How much more will it be if you drive me to San Sebastian on your way back? 50 pesetas. Don't kid me. Why? 35 pesetas. It's not worth it, I said. Drive me to the Hotel Panier Fleury. At the hotel, I paid the driver and gave him a tip. The car was powdered with dust. I rubbed the rod case through the dust. It seemed the last thing that connected me with Spain and the fiesta. The driver put the car in gear and went down the street. I watched it turn off to take the road to Spain. I went into the hotel and they gave me a room. It was the same room I had slept in when Bill and Cohen and I were in Bayonne. That seemed a very long time ago. I washed, changed my shirt, and went out in the town. At a newspaper kiosk, I bought a copy of the New York Herald and sat in a cafe to read it. It felt strange to be in France again. There was a safe, suburban feeling. I wished I had gone up to Paris with Bill, except that Paris would have meant more fiesta-ing. I was through with fiestas for a while. It would be quiet in San Sebastian. The season does not open there until August. I could get a good hotel room and read and swim. There was a fine beach there. There were wonderful trees along the promenade above the beach, and there were many children sent down with their nurses before the season opened. In the evening there would be band concerts under the trees across from the Café Marinas. I could sit in the marinas and listen. "How does one eat inside?" I asked the waiter. Inside the cafe was a restaurant. "Well, very well. One eats very well." "Good." I went in and ate dinner. It was a big meal for France, but it seemed very carefully apportioned after Spain. I drank a bottle of wine for company. It was a Chateau Margaux. It was pleasant to be drinking slowly, and to be tasting the wine and to be drinking alone. A bottle of wine was good company. Afterward I had coffee. The waiter recommended a Basque liqueur called Isera. He brought in the bottle and poured a liqueur glass full. He said Isera was made of the flowers of the Pyrenees. The veritable flowers of the Pyrenees. It looked like hair oil and smelled like Italian strega. I told him to take the flowers of the Pyrenees away and bring me a Vieux mark. The mark was good. I had a second mark after the coffee. The waiter seemed a little offended about the flowers of the Pyrenees, so I overtipped him. That made him happy. It felt comfortable to be in a country where it is so simple to make people happy. You can never tell whether a Spanish waiter will thank you. Everything is on such a clear financial basis in France. It is the simplest country to live in. No one makes things complicated by becoming your friend for any obscure reason. If you want people to like you, you have only to spend a little money. I spent a little money and the waiter liked me. He appreciated my valuable qualities. He would be glad to see me back. I would dine there again sometime and he would be glad to see me and would want me at his table. It would be a sincere liking because it would have a sound basis. I was back in France. Next morning I tipped everyone a little too much at the hotel to make more friends and left on the morning train for San Sebastian. At the station I did not tip the porter more than I should because I did not think I would ever see him again. I only wanted a few good French friends in Bayonne to make me welcome in case I should come back there again. I knew that if they remembered me their friendship would be loyal. At Irun we had to change trains and show passports. I hated to leave France. Life was so simple in France. I felt I was a fool to be going back into Spain. In Spain you could not tell about anything. I felt like a fool to be going back into it, but I stood in line with my passport, opened my bags for the customs, bought a ticket, went through a gate, climbed onto the train, and after 40 minutes and 8 tunnels I was at San Sebastian. Even on a hot day, San Sebastian has a certain early morning quality. The trees seem as though their leaves were never quite dry. The streets feel as though they had just been sprinkled. It is always cool and shady on certain streets on the hottest day. I went to a hotel in the town where I had stopped before, and they gave me a room with a balcony that opened out above the roofs of the town. There was a green mountainside beyond the roofs. I unpacked my bags and stacked my books on the table beside the head of the bed, put out my shaving things, hung up some clothes in the big armoire, and made up a bundle for the laundry. Then I took a shower in the bathroom and went down to lunch. Spain had not changed to summertime, so I was early. I set my watch again. I had recovered an hour by coming to San Sebastian. As I went into the dining room, the concierge brought me a police bulletin to fill out. I signed it and asked him for 2 telegraph forms and wrote a message to the Hotel Montoya, telling them to forward all mail and telegrams for me to this address. I calculated how many days I would be in San Sebastian and then wrote out a wire to the office asking them to hold mail, but forward all wires for me to San Sebastian for 6 days. Then I went in and had lunch. After lunch I went up to my room, read a while and went to sleep. When I woke it was 4:30. I found my swimming suit, wrapped it with a comb and a towel, and went downstairs and walked up the street to the Concha. The tide was about halfway out. The beach was smooth and firm, and the sand yellow. I went into a bathing cabin, undressed, put on my suit, and walked across the smooth sand to the sea. The sand was warm under bare feet. There were quite a few people in the water and on the beach. Beyond where the headlands of the Concha almost met to form the harbor, there was a white line of breakers and the open sea. Although the tide was going out, there were a few slow rollers. They came in like undulations in the water, gathered weight of water, and then broke smoothly on the warm sand. I waded out. The water was cold. As a roller came, I dove, swam out underwater, and came to the surface with all the chill gone. I swam out to the raft, pulled myself up, and lay on the hot planks. A boy and girl were at the other end. The girl had undone the top strap of her bathing suit and was browning her back. The boy lay face downward on the raft and talked to her. She laughed at things he said and turned her brown back in the sun. I lay on the raft in the sun until I was dry. Then I tried several dives. I dove deep once, swimming down to the bottom. I swam with my eyes open, and it was green and dark. The raft made a dark shadow. I came out of water beside the raft, pulled up, dove once more, holding it for length, and then swam ashore. I lay on the beach until I was dry, then went into the bathing cabin, took off my suit, sloshed myself with fresh water, and rubbed dry. I walked around the harbor under the trees to the casino, and then up one of the cool streets to the Café Marinas. There was an orchestra playing inside the cafe, and I sat out on the terrace and enjoyed the fresh coolness in the hot day, and had a glass of lemon juice and shaved ice, and then a long whiskey and soda. I sat in front of the marinas for a long time and read and watched the people and listened to the music. Later, when it began to get dark, I walked around the harbor and out along the promenade, and finally back to the hotel for supper. There was a bicycle race on, the Tour du Pays Basque, and the riders were stopping that night in San Sebastian. In the dining room, at one side there was a long table of bicycle riders, eating with their trainers and managers. They were all French and Belgians, and paid close attention to their meal, but they were having a good time. At the head of the table were two good-looking French girls, with much Rue du Faubourg Montmartre chic. I could not make out whom they belonged to. They all spoke in slang at the long table, and there were many private jokes and some jokes at the far end that were not repeated when the girls asked to hear them. The next morning at 5 o'clock the race resumed with the last lap, San Sebastian Bilbao. The bicycle riders drank much wine and were burned and browned by the sun. They did not take the race seriously except among themselves. They had raced among themselves so often that it did not make much difference who won, especially in a foreign country. The money could be arranged. The man who had a matter of 2 minutes lead in the race had an attack of boils which were very painful. He sat on the small of his back. His neck was very red and the blonde hairs were sunburned. The other riders joked him about his boils. He tapped on the table with his fork. "Listen," he said, "tomorrow my nose is so tight on the handlebars that the only thing touches those boils is a lovely breeze." One of the girls looked at him down the table, and he grinned and turned red. The Spaniards, they said, did not know how to pedal. I had coffee out on the terrace with the team manager of one of the big bicycle manufacturers. He said it had been a very pleasant race and would have been worth watching if Bottecchia had not abandoned it at Pamplona. The dust had been bad, but in Spain the roads were better than in France. Bicycle road racing was the only sport in the world, he said. Had I ever followed the Tour de France? Only in the papers. The Tour de France was the greatest sporting event in the world. Following and organizing the road races had made him know France. Few people know France. All spring and all summer and all fall he spent on the road with bicycle road racers. Look at the number of motor cars now that followed the riders from town to town in a road race. It was a rich country and more sportive every year. It would be the most sportive country in the world. It was bicycle road racing did it. That in football. He knew France. La France sportive. He knew road racing. We had a cognac. After all, though, it wasn't bad to get back to Paris. There is only one pen on me. In all the world, that is. Paris is the town the most sportive in the world. Did I know the Chope de Nigre? Did I not? I would see him there sometime. I certainly would. We would drink another fine together. We certainly would. They started at 6 o'clock less a quarter in the morning. Would I be up for the depart? I would certainly try to. Would I like him to call me? It was very interesting. I would leave a call at the desk. He would not mind calling me. I could not let him take the trouble. I would leave a call at the desk. We said goodbye until the next morning. In the morning when I awoke, the bicycle riders and their following cars had been on the road for 3 hours. I had coffee in the papers in bed and then dressed and took my bathing suit down to the beach. Everything was fresh and cool and damp in the early morning. Nurses in uniform and in peasant costume walked under the trees with children. The Spanish children were beautiful. Some bootblacks sat together under a tree talking to a soldier. The soldier had only one arm. The tide was in and there was a good breeze and a surf on the beach. I undressed in one of the bath cabins, crossed the narrow line of beach and went into the water. I swam out, trying to swim through the rollers but having to dive sometimes. Then in the quiet water I turned and floated. Floating, I saw only the sky and felt the drop and lift of the swells. I swam back to the surf and coasted in, face down on a big roller, then turned and swam, trying to keep in the trough and not have a wave break over me. It made me tired, swimming in the trough, and I turned and swam out to the raft. The water was buoyant and cold. It felt as though you could never sink. I swam slowly, it seemed like a long swim with the high tide, and then pulled up on the raft and sat, dripping, on the boards that were becoming hot in the sun. I looked around at the bay, the old town, the casino, the line of trees along the promenade, and the big hotels with their white porches and gold-lettered names. Off on the right, almost closing the harbor, was a green hill with a castle. The raft rocked with the motion of the water. On the other side of the narrow gap that led into the open sea was another high headland. I thought I would like to swim across the bay, but I was afraid of cramp. I sat in the sun and watched the bathers on the beach. They looked very small. After a while I stood up, gripped with my toes on the edge of the raft as it tipped with my weight, and dove cleanly and deeply to come up through the lightning water, blew the salt water out of my head, and swam slowly and steadily into shore. After I was dressed and had paid for the bath cabin, I walked back to the hotel. The bicycle racers had left several copies of El Udo around, and I gathered them up in the reading room and took them out and sat in an easy chair in the sun to read about and catch up on French sporting life. While I was sitting there, the concierge came out with a blue envelope in his hand. "A telegram for you, sir." I poked my finger along under the fold that was fastened down, spread it open, and read it. It had been forwarded from Paris. "Could you come Hotel Montana, Madrid?" Rather in trouble, Brett." I tipped the concierge and read the message again. A postman was coming along the sidewalk. He turned in the hotel. He had a big mustache and looked very military. He came out of the hotel again. The concierge was just behind him. "Here's another telegram for you, sir." "Thank you," I said. I opened it. It was forwarded from Pamplona. "Could you come Hotel Montana, Madrid?" "Yeah, rather in trouble, Brett." The concierge stood there waiting for another tip, probably. "What time is there a train for Madrid?" "It left at 9 this morning. There is a slow train at 11, and the Sud Express at 10 tonight." "Get me a berth on the Sud Express. Do you want the money now?" "Just as you wish," he said. "I will have it put on the bill." "Do that." Well, that meant San Sebastian all shot to hell. I suppose, vaguely, I had expected something of the sort. I saw the concierge standing in the doorway. "Bring me a telegram form, please." He brought it and I took out my fountain pen and printed. "Lady Ashley, Hotel Montana, Madrid. Arriving Sud Express tomorrow, love. Jake." That seemed to handle it. That was it. Send a girl off with one man. Introduce her to another to go off with him. Now go and bring her back. And sign the wire with love. That was it, all right. I went into lunch. I did not sleep much that night on the Sud Express. In the morning I had breakfast in the dining car and watched the rock and pine country between Avila and Escorial. I saw the Escorial out of the window, gray and long and cold in the sun, and did not give a damn about it. I saw Madrid come up over the plain, a compact white skyline on the top of a little cliff away off across the sun-hardened country. The Norte station in Madrid is the end of the line. All trains finish there. They don't go on anywhere. Outside were cabs and taxis and a line of hotel runners. It was like a country town. I took a taxi and we climbed up through the gardens, by the empty palace and the unfinished church on the edge of the cliff, and on up until we were in the high, hot, modern town. The taxi coasted down a smooth street to the Puerta del Sol, and then through the traffic and out into the Carrera San Geronimo. All the shops had their awnings down against the heat. The windows on the sunny side of the street were shuttered. The taxi stopped at the curb. I saw the sign Hotel Montana on the second floor. The taxi driver carried the bags in and left them by the elevator. I could not make the elevator work, so I walked up. On the second floor up was a cut brass sign, Hotel Montana. I rang and no one came to the door. I rang again and a maid with a sullen face opened the door. "Is Lady Ashley here?" I asked. She looked at me dully. "Is an Englishwoman here?" She turned and called someone inside. A very fat woman came to the door. Her hair was gray and stiffly oiled in scallops around her face. She was short and commanding. "Muy buenos," I said. "Is there an Englishwoman here? I would like to see this English lady." "Muy buenos. Yes, there is a female English. Certainly you can see her if she wishes to see you." "She wishes to see me. The chica will ask her." "It is very hot. It is very hot in the summer in Madrid." "And how cold in winter." "Yes, it is very cold in winter." Did I want to stay myself in person in the Hotel Montana? Of that as yet I was undecided, but it would give me pleasure if my bags were brought up from the ground floor in order that they might not be stolen. Nothing was ever stolen in the Hotel Montana. In other fondas, yes. Not here. No. The personages of this establishment were rigidly selectioned. I was happy to hear it. Nevertheless, I would welcome the upbringle of my bags. The maid came in and said that the female English wanted to see the male English now, at once. "Good," I said. "You see, it is as I said." Clearly. I followed the maid's back down a long, dark corridor. At the end, she knocked on a door. "Hello," said Brett. "Is it you, Jake?" "It's me." "Come in. Come in." I opened the door. The maid closed it after me. Brett was in bed. She had just been brushing her hair and held the brush in her hand. The room was in that disorder produced only by those who have always had servants. "Darling," Brett said. I went over to the bed and put my arms around her. She kissed me, and while she kissed me I could feel she was thinking of something else. She was trembling in my arms. She felt very small. "Darling, I've had such a hell of a time." "Tell me about it." "Nothing to tell. He only left yesterday. I made him go." "Why didn't you keep him?" "I don't know. It isn't the sort of thing one does. I don't think I hurt him any." "You were probably damn good for him. He shouldn't be living with anyone. I realized that right away." "No." "Oh hell," she said. "Let's not talk about it. Let's never talk about it." "All right." It was rather a knock his being ashamed of me. He was ashamed of me for a while, you know. "No." "Oh yes, they ragged him about me at the cafe, I guess. He wanted me to grow my hair out. Me, with long hair. I'd look so like hell. It's funny. He said it would make me more womanly. I'd look a fright." "What happened?" "Oh, he got over that. He wasn't ashamed of me long." "What was it about being in trouble?" "I didn't know whether I could make him go, and I didn't have a sou to go away and leave him. He tried to give me a lot of money, you know. I told him I had scads of it. He knew that was a lie. I couldn't take his money, you know." "No." "Oh, let's not talk about it. There were some funny things, though. Do give me a cigarette." I lit the cigarette. He learned his English as a waiter in Gib. Yes. He wanted to marry me, finally. Really? Of course. I can't even marry Mike. Maybe he thought that would make him Lord Ashley. No, it wasn't that. He really wanted to marry me. So I couldn't go away from him, he said. He wanted to make it sure I could never go away from him. After I'd gotten more womanly, of course. You ought to feel set up. I do. I'm all right again. He's wiped out that damned Cohen. Good. You know, I'd have lived with him if I hadn't seen it was bad for him. We got along damned well. Outside of your personal appearance. Oh, he'd have gotten used to that. She put out the cigarette. I'm 34, you know. I'm not going to be one of these bitches that ruins children. No. I'm not going to be that way. I feel rather good, you know. I feel rather set up. Good. She looked away. I thought she was looking for another cigarette. Then I saw she was crying. I could feel her crying, shaking and crying. She wouldn't look up. I put my arms around her. Don't let's ever talk about it. Please don't let's ever talk about it. Dear Brett. I'm going back to Mike. I could feel her crying as I held her close. He's so damned nice and he's so awful. He's my sort of thing. She would not look up. I stroked her hair. I could feel her shaking. I won't be one of those bitches, she said. But oh, Jake, please let's never talk about it. We left the Hotel Montana. The woman who ran the hotel would not let me pay the bill. The bill had been paid. Oh well, let it go, Brett said. It doesn't matter now. We rode in a taxi down to the Palace Hotel, left the bags, arranged for berths on the Sud Express for the night, and went into the bar of the hotel for a cocktail. We sat on high stools at the bar, while the barman shook the martinis in a large nickeled shaker. It's funny what a wonderful gentility you get in the bar of a big hotel, I said. Barmen and jockeys are the only people who are polite anymore. No matter how vulgar a hotel is, the bar is always nice. It's odd. Bartenders have always been fine. You know, Brett said, it's quite true. He is only 19. Isn't it amazing? We touched the two glasses as they stood side by side on the bar. They were coldly beaded. Outside the curtained window was the summer heat of Madrid. I like an olive and a martini, I said to the barman. Right you are, sir. There you are. Thanks. I should have asked, you know. The barman went far enough up the bar so that he would not hear our conversation. Brett had sipped from the martini as it stood on the wood. Then she picked it up. Her hand was steady enough to lift it after that first sip. It's good. Isn't it a nice bar? They're all nice bars. You know, I didn't believe it at first. He was born in 1905. I was in school in Paris then. Think of that. Anything you want me to think about it. Don't be an ass. Would you buy a lady a drink? We'll have 2 more martinis. As they were before, sir. They were very good. Brett smiled at him. Thank you, ma'am. Well, bungo, Brett said. Bungo. You know, Brett said, he'd only been with 2 women before. He never cared about anything but bullfighting. He's got plenty of time. I don't know. He thinks it was me, not the show in general. Well, it was you. Yes, it was me. I thought you weren't going to ever talk about it. How can I help it? You'll lose it if you talk about it. I just talk around it. You know, I feel rather damn good, Jake. You should. You know, it makes one feel rather good deciding not to be a bitch. Yes. It's sort of what we have instead of God. Some people have God, I said. Quite a lot. He never worked very well with me. Should we have another martini? The barman shook up 2 more martinis and poured them out into fresh glasses. Where will we have lunch? I asked Brett. The bar was cool. You could feel the heat outside through the window. Here, asked Brett. It's rotten here in the hotel. Do you know a place called Botton's? I asked the barman. Yes, sir. Would you like to have me write out the address? Thank you. We lunched upstairs at Botton's. It is one of the best restaurants in the world. We had roast young suckling pig and drank Rioja Alta. Brett did not eat much. She never ate much. I ate a very big meal and drank 3 bottles of Rioja Alta. How do you feel? Jake, Brett asked. My God, what a meal you've eaten. I feel fine. Do you want a dessert? Lord, no. Brett was smoking. You like to eat, don't you? She said. Yes, I said. I like to do a lot of things. What do you like to do? Oh, I said, I like to do a lot of things. Don't you want a dessert? You asked me that once, Brett said. Yes, I said. So I did. Let's have another bottle of Rauja Alta. It's very good. You haven't drunk much of it, I said. I have. You haven't seen. Let's get 2 bottles, I said. The bottles came. I poured a little in my glass, then a glass for Brett, then filled my glass. We touched glasses. Bungo, Brett said. I drank my glass and poured out another. Brett put her hand on my arm. Don't get drunk, Jake, she said. You don't have to. How do you know? Don't, she said. You'll be all right. I'm not getting drunk, I said. I'm just drinking a little wine. I like to drink wine. Don't get drunk, she said. Jake, don't get drunk. Want to go for a ride, I said. Want to ride through the town. Right, Brett said. I haven't seen Madrid. I should see Madrid. I'll finish this, I said. Downstairs, we came out through the first-floor dining room to the street. A waiter went for a taxi. It was hot and bright. Up the street was a little square with trees and grass where there were taxis parked. A taxi came up the street, the waiter hanging out at the side. I tipped him and told the driver where to drive and got in beside Brett. The driver started up the street. I settled back. Brett moved close to me. We sat close against each other. I put my arm around her and she rested against me comfortably. It was very hot and bright, and the houses looked sharply white. We turned out onto the Gran Via. Oh, Jake, Brett said, we could have had such a damned good time together. Ahead was a mounted policeman in khaki directing traffic. He raised his baton. The car slowed, suddenly pressing Brett against me. Yes, I said. Isn't it pretty to think so? The end. Best audiobooks for free. Hope that you have enjoyed this production of Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble, as your subscription is the support we need to create more great free content.